Ladies and gentlemen, if you're like me, then you are sick and tired of cliche car review videos. Don't get me wrong, it's great to know exactly how many cubic feet of storage the bed of this truck has, or what the exact turning radius of this Rivian is down to 1/8 of an inch. But if you're looking for information like that, this probably isn't the best video for you to watch. That's because I'm really only gonna focus on the things that matter to people who drive these trucks every day, rather than the things that are probably only important to automotive journalists. That's why I've decided to break this video into 3 main sections: the options that are on this truck, how much you should be paying for one, and my final thoughts and opinions on it. Let's get started with some of the features and options that are on this Rivian, starting with how to actually power it. Now obviously you don't put gas in this truck because that defeats the whole purpose of it, but you still have to know where to plug it in, and you do that at the very front of this truck, already pretty unusual. But when it comes to actually accessing your charge port, you do not simply open this little panel by pulling on it like you would in a traditional vehicle. Instead, you have to locate these 3 little lines on the very edge of your fender, and when you slide your finger across those 3 little lines, the panel will open by itself. Part of the reason this Rivian looks like an actual truck and not some ugly teardrop is thanks to the air vents that are located at the front and the back of your tire wells. They allow air to pass more efficiently through the vehicle rather than getting stuck on its big front end. I should also mention that there's a sneaky little spoiler on top of this truck, as well as 2 air guards on the side of your back glass that also help with this truck's aerodynamics. One thing that pretty much anyone who's in the market for a truck asks themselves is how much cargo can it carry? Now even though this Rivian isn't as big as some other trucks on the market, it still carries more than enough cargo for the average person. Part of the reason this truck is so good at carrying things is because it doesn't have an engine. And because it doesn't have an engine, it gets a frunk. When it comes to the size of this frunk, like I mentioned earlier, I don't like to go over the exact dimensions of these because I don't feel it gives you an actual idea of how big or small it is. But I do think it's important that you have a relative idea of exactly how big it is, which is why I would compare the size of this frunk roughly to a Victorian era bathtub. Now I can't talk about this truck's cargo space without bringing up its coolest feature, the gear tunnel. The way it works is you first have to locate this little button on top of your bed, and whenever you press it, this little door will loosen itself. Once you have this little door unlocked, all you have to do is fold it downward like so, and voila, you have access to your gear tunnel. This gear tunnel is awesome for a lot of different reasons, but the first one is it's more than large enough to hold a full-size human such as myself, and you never really know when something like that is gonna come in handy. Obviously, that's not the only reason this gear tunnel is useful, because it's also weatherproof, which means you can put your skis or your dirty boots or whatever else in here after you're done with them, and you don't have to worry about getting the cab of your Rivian dirty. But what if you need to access your MP3 player that you've got stored in your gear tunnel, but you're already driving down the road? Well, Rivian thought of that too, of course, which is why they added an access port in the back of your middle seat here, which allows you to get to your gear tunnel really easily, even if you're driving down the road. If you think that the interesting cargo spaces on this truck stop with the gear tunnel, well, you would be incorrect. And that's because the way you open the tailgate on this truck is pretty interesting as well. When you're standing on the outside of your R1T and you want to open your tailgate, all you have to do is press this little button on the left side of your bed here, and it will open itself for you. Once you open your tailgate, you'll notice that you still don't have full access to your bed thanks to this tonneau cover that Rivian gives you. This tonneau cover is different from most of the other ones out there because it's actually really easy to use. To demonstrate just how easy this tonneau cover is to use, I'm going to do so by sitting exactly where I am without moving, and I can do that because the only thing I have to do to open this thing is by pressing a button that's right on top of the other button I was telling you about that opens the tailgate, and whenever I press it, the tonneau cover opens all by itself. And then when I want to close it, all I have to do is press that same button again, and it will magically close by itself. As we begin to make our way inside this truck, I think we should pause and acknowledge the doors, because even the doors on this Rivian are pretty darn cool. For example, right now the door handles are extended outward to allow for easier access because the truck is in park and unlocked. But if I were to lock this truck or simply start driving it, the door handles will go back to being flush with the rest of the vehicle, which obviously helps with aerodynamics. When you open this door up, the cool features don't stop, because if you look just below the window switches, you'll see a little storage cubby, which admittedly most cars have, but this one's kind of cool because it opens a little wider than a normal one would, which makes it a little easier to grab whatever you have in there. But then if you work your way to the very outer edge of this door, you will find one of this Rivian's coolest secrets. Now, if this were a Rolls-Royce, this is where I would demonstrate this car's built-in umbrella, but of course this isn't a Rolls-Royce, it's a Rivian. So what do you get instead of an umbrella? Well, something arguably even more useful, a flashlight. Now that I'm inside this R1T, I want to go over some features that people who own this truck will actually care about, starting with the interior storage. Now, I already mentioned that there's a little storage cubby on the driver's door panel, and don't worry, all 4 doors get those. But there's also a pretty nice center console on this truck, and when you open it up, you'll notice it's not the longest thing in the world, but it is quite deep and therefore usable. There's also 2 secret storage areas underneath both of the front seats. Now, what you might want to keep in those, well, that's your business, not mine. If that's still not enough storage options for you, well, just hop in the back and look underneath the rear seats, because there is a massive storage area underneath them. Now, I should point out the one space this truck doesn't have is a glove box. If you want one of those, you'll have to wait for one of the newer Rivian models, but I still think that there's more than enough storage options in this truck to accommodate whatever you might need. One thing people always ask me about this truck whenever they see the inside of it is, how's the infotainment system? To which I respond with really good, which is a really good thing considering it controls literally every feature on this truck. For example, if I want to open the frunk or the tailgate or the tonneau cover or the gear tunnel or control any other feature on the outside of this truck, I can do so from right here in the infotainment system, which is pretty darn incredible. When it comes to the climate controls on this truck, things get a little bit tricky because there aren't any physical dials to control it. Instead, you have to use the infotainment system to adjust the temperature and airflow amount to your desired level. But not only that, you can't even physically adjust the air vents in this truck. Yes, you heard me correctly. You cannot manually adjust the air vents in this truck, unlike pretty much every other vehicle in the world. So how on earth do you adjust where you want the air blowing? Well, once again, you have to hop inside the infotainment system, because there you're able to drag a little line to wherever you want the air blowing, which actually works pretty well, but I can see a lot of people not liking that. You can also control various vehicle settings from within the infotainment system, like how aggressive you want the regenerative braking to be, or how hard you want your ride to feel, and so on and so forth. But the thing I really want to draw your attention to is the ride height control. You see, this vehicle has air suspension, which allows you to raise it or lower it with the press of a button, or should I say a press of the screen. Now, this is especially useful for when you're off-roading, because it gives you a total of 15 inches of ground clearance, which is pretty darn good. Overall, I'm really happy with the infotainment system. It's really responsive, it's extremely intuitive, and it's just really well built. But that's not to say it's perfect, because I do have a few complaints about it, but to be fair, my biggest complaint doesn't really have to do with the infotainment system and more has to do with the camera system. Don't get me wrong, you do at least get a full 360-degree view of your truck, which a lot of other vehicles can't say, but overall, the camera quality itself is really quite average, or honestly, for a vehicle in this price point, a little below average. It's not that it sucks or anything like that, it just looks like a camera you would find in a cheap Corolla or Mazda or something like that, not a $70,000 to $80,000 electric pickup truck that's supposed to be from the future. So now that we've gone over all the features that most people care about anyway, let's talk about the stuff that you really want to know about, the money. But in all seriousness, there's a lot of confusion out there on these, and rightfully so, right? When these things were on sale new, you know, they sell for around 80, 90 grand, depending on, you know, which your spec and your trim and all that good stuff, right? But there for a while, especially when these things first dropped around 2 years ago, which it's crazy to believe it's already been that long, but when these things first dropped 2 years ago, they were selling for almost $100,000 more than what Rivian wanted for them, which is just absurd. I mean, it's a nice truck, but it's not $180,000 nice, right? But now you're starting to see a lot of these on the used market. This one behind me is for sale right now. There's a lot of these popping up and a lot of uncertainty about, you know, what should I look for? What should I buy? You know, is mileage a concern, or is the pricing more of a concern? Like, what on earth do I need to know in order to make a safe purchase, right? And that's what I kind of want to go over now. Let's talk about this truck in particular. It's an R1T adventure model. It's a 2022. And most trucks with this spec, you know, it's a fairly decent spec. I think white's a little more desirable. The bigger wheels are a little more desirable, but overall, it's a pretty nice spec, right? And these are selling for anywhere between $60,000 to $70,000. You're starting to see these creep into the 50s, and that's exciting because this is a lot of truck for, you know, if you can get one of these for, you know, 50, 55 grand here in the next year or two, do it. It's a really great truck. But this one in particular, I think it's got around 15,000 miles on it. I think they're selling it for a little less than 70, which is a good price. It's very average. It's what you're seeing a lot of them go for. And what's interesting about these is they're kind of selling at auction for exactly what they're selling for at dealerships, which is interesting in my opinion, because usually at auction, they go for a little bit more. When I say auction, I don't mean like Manheim dealership auctions. I mean like Bring a Trailer, Cars and Bids, enthusiast car auction sites, right? When it comes to where you should be looking to buy one of these, that's also where it tends to get a little bit tricky, right? Because you want to be careful. It's an electric vehicle. It's a high voltage battery, and you want to know that the previous owner or owners in a lot of these cases took really good care of it. That's why I would recommend buying from reputable dealers. First of all, I would probably avoid buying these private party unless you know the individual. I always err on the side of caution when people are buying off Facebook Marketplace or eBay or whatever, because there are a lot of uncertainties when buying from an individual. Buying from a dealership has a lot of advantages. There's financing, they accept trade-ins, there's recourse. That's the biggest one for me, right? Like if you pay 70 grand for a truck and the battery goes kaput after 2 weeks, I mean, obviously it's under warranty, but you want to be able to address that with the previous owner, especially if you just bought it within a couple weeks, right? And that's what buying from a dealership enables you to do it. You have somewhere to say, hey, this isn't right, I need you to make it right, which is, like I said, a great benefit. Retail stores, be careful with those, you know, the big shiny showrooms and all that. You know, you got 25, 30 sales guys who usually don't know a thing about the product they're actually selling. They're just trying to move some units. Just be careful, because when it comes to sales guys not knowing these trucks, you have to know it better than them. They're not going to be able to tell you all the secrets. They're not going to be able to tell you probably about the warranty without doing a quick check, which, by the way, the warranty on this truck's pretty darn good. 5 years, 60,000 miles, bumper to bumper, basic coverage, whatever you want to call it. Like I was saying, when it comes to a dealership, just buy from one that's reputable. If you have one in town you've bought cars from years and you have a relationship, that's probably a good one. Just avoid the little shops that are on the side of the road. You know, you probably don't want to buy this if it's not even a paved parking lot, right? If you're going to a little trailer on the side of the highway and they've got a cool Rivian, and guess what? It's only $47,000, which is a good 10, 15, 20 grand less than most of them are going for. When it comes to aging, it's hard to say if there's really a lot of rust issues with these trucks yet, just because they haven't been out that long. I mean, you can play it safe and try to look for ones in Arizona or Southern California, New Mexico, places like that that don't get a ton of salt or ocean salt air or anything like that. But I think overall they're probably pretty good, but time will tell. So in conclusion, my final thoughts and opinions on the R1T is it's a really awesome truck. Sure, it has a few drawbacks, but what vehicle doesn't? And the drawbacks on this thing are so minimal that who really cares? In terms of driving it and whatnot, I know I didn't show you like me actually driving it, but I've driven this thing pretty extensively, and it drives well. I will say the regenerative braking is intense. Even when it's on its lower setting, it's intense. And if you don't like that, this might not be the truck for you. Other than that, you know, the climate controls are a little annoying, but they're good. You know, you tap to adjust the temperature, which is always at the bottom of the screen, which is nice, and it pulls up the whole climate menu. It's not a huge deal. The biggest deal that I think a lot of people will have is not being able to manually adjust the air vents. I think that's a little, I don't know if that was such a good idea. In terms of the rest of the truck, I absolutely adore it. I think it's fantastic. I think it looks unique. I think the oval headlights with the light bar across the middle is such a genius design. It's so distinctive. It puts Rivian on the map. When you see one, you know right away, Rivian, which is incredible because this is not an old brand. I mean, I think technically it was founded like over a decade ago, but you didn't start seeing Rivians on the road consistently until 2 years ago. So it's pretty incredible that they already have such a distinctive look. It's really great marketing in my opinion, and I just really like it overall. In terms of the interior, it's really well built. It has some really cool gimmicks. I didn't show you the speaker just because frankly, I don't really care about the speaker. Toyota's doing it now, it's whatever. But yeah, it's cool enough. The flashlight's pretty cool. Being able to control everything from the infotainment system, pretty cool if you're into that sort of thing. But yeah, if you're in the market for an electric pickup truck, there's a lot of options out there now. I think it's a better option than the Lightning, and I'll go into that whenever I review the Lightning as to why I think that, but I just think it's a great alternative. It's not huge, but it's not small. There's plenty of room in the cabin, whether you're in the front and the back. It's about the size of a Tacoma, but it's a lot roomier than a Tacoma on the inside. Overall, if you like it and you think you want to buy one, just do it. You know, these things are holding their value pretty well right now. I'm sure they'll start to appreciate a little more as we start to see more and more of these on the road, but we're already 2 years in and they're still selling within, 10-15% of their original asking price, which is, pretty incredible, especially when you consider how much manufacturers are discounting their electric vehicle lineup right now. I love it. I think it's a great vehicle. Like I said, if you like it, buy it. If not, don't.